While nisaphuza lapho nibhizi nesamabhabhalazi, ngicela nikhumbule ukuthi iy'ngane kumele ziye esikoleni January, February, back to school. Nani niyazi ukuphepha unilindile ngoJanuary. Guys, I know it's festive, or it's still festive. Those of you that have parents, please budget a little bit of money. Or if you can, go to the shops already and start buying stationery and school uniform for your kids for the new year. Save some money for your registration, for your school fees, and for other things that your kids need. Let's stop acting shocked in January when we have to now hustle for our children. It's kind of boring. We're in 2023. We know these things by now. My third born son, Ushaga, is starting school, preschool next year. I'm quite excited. Grade R. Uzulu, I'm not sure what grade he's going in, my second son. I wanted to highlight that Unkun's no Africa in China currently, and there's a spread of COVID again, so they've been locked down again, and they're currently doing online schooling with their school. They're an international school in China. And while they were doing that, I was speaking to their mom about schooling and online schooling, and I remembered that, when they were still in South Africa with me, they went to an amazing primary school called Emmarentia Primary in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. And during that time, I experimented with home education, homeschooling. I've made a few videos about home education. I'll drop I think it's 2 or 3 videos. I'll drop the links in the description below if you want to know about homeschooling and home education. But I found this interesting article from the Daily Maverick. It's from the 6th of January 2022, and it's written by Anel Berger, or Berger, dailymaverick.co.za. I thought I'd share this with you. If you're considering online schooling, home education, if you're part of the Pestalozzi Trust, if you're part of the Brownie Homeschoolers group on Facebook, something to think about as we start prepping for our children to go back to school, and just the mindset of the education and skills they need for their lives. Anel writes, the Basic Education Law Amendments Bill is set to make changes that will undo years of advances in home education. Home educators are deeply concerned that 6 years down the line, their efforts to help shape a child-centered, sustainable, verifiable approach to home education have been ignored. And I was actually part of some WhatsApp groups and some sit-downs with parents trying to fight this, or trying to help sculpt this BELA. It's called the BELA Bill, the Basic Education Law Amendments Bill. Anyways, in October 2012, in answer to a parliamentary question by ACDP Member of Parliament Sherry Lynn Dudley, Education Minister Angie Motshekga said the purpose of planned changes to the law was to provide for home education as part of the formal schooling system. While that may have sounded reasonable, in fact, the changes that are now set to be introduced have the potential to outlaw home education in its current form. Home education became legal in 1996 after the apartheid government had prohibited it. And it is estimated that at the time, 50 families followed this alternative approach to education. The national census of 2011 indicated that about 57,000 pupils were home educated. The current number of home educated pupils is estimated to be more than 120,000. Understand, in 1996, the reason a lot of parents, in particular white parents, wanted to home educate is because they didn't like the idea of a black government. And they thought the black government was going to destroy their children, destroy the schooling system. And because a lot of them were racist, they didn't want their children to be in class with black kids. Of course, today a lot of things have changed. There are still a lot of racist white parents, but there are many parents that just have alternative religions, alternative beliefs, and want to educate their children differently. Some parents, of course, want to educate their children because they are slow learners or they are quick learners, and they want to manage the pace of the learning. Some children have got very strenuous sporting calendars, music calendars. They might be TV personalities. They might travel a lot. So home education becomes best. Home education is not school or institutional education. It is an education approach that is child-paced with no strict adherence to grades. The child progresses through levels once the current level is mastered or completed. Home education is an interest-led approach to education. The child has control of his education as his learning is based on his interests, ability, stage of development, and a desire for in-depth study. Think of that child who's absolutely fixated on dinosaurs and knows them by their scientific names. While this is a broad description of the practice, homeschooling follows a number of different approaches, such as the classical approach, natural learning, Charlotte Mason, Montessori, and eclectic, which is a mix of different approaches and materials. Over the past 25 years, it has proven to be a successful modality in increasing popularity. Parents choose home education for a number of reasons, topmost of which is the desire to give their children a quality, individualized education that will equip them for their adult life in an ever faster changing world. We want to equip our children with the skills for continued learning, to nurture their curiosity, to teach them problem-solving skills, and cultivate grit. We want them to be critical thinkers and have good communication skills. And these are literally some of the reasons I wanted to home educate my children as well. Understanding, I just want to highlight, children go to school from 7 till 2, that's 7 hours. Home education is generally what parents do after hours. The extra classes, the tutors, sitting there with your mom, your dad on the weekends, when you're going to the farm, when you're going to sell at little stalls, flea markets, when you're acquiring certain skills because your dad is a mechanic. That is homeschooling. Reading extra books, going to the library, watching extra videos on YouTube. That is homeschooling, in my opinion, of course. Some parents have the foresight to realize that a school education will not be in the best interest of their children and never enroll them at an education institution. Others became disillusioned with school when their children's educational and emotional needs were not met. Distance learning, also known as online schooling and sometimes called homeschooling, is lumped together with home education purely because the place where the child receives their education is primarily the home, and current legislation does not make provision for institutionalized education away from the institution. The COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdown were key drivers in the growth of distance learning, and CAPS-aligned service providers and online schools have become household names. Home educators have raised significant concerns about Section 51 of the Basic Education Law Amendments, the BELA bill, which is more in accordance with distance learning than it is with home education. Parents who choose distance learning will have fewer concerns about the provisions of the section. However, a point of shared contention is the requirement that parents must ask for permission to educate their children from home, and that they must convince the head of the provincial education department that they are acting in the best interest of their children. Only once the head of department is satisfied will a child be registered for home education. And I've been to the Department of Education in Gauteng, and it's a mess. Used to be a mess when I was there. Panyaza Lusufi spoken about this when he was MEC of Education. They were just not equipped to deal with parents that want to educate their kids. Some of the counters were, of course, some of these parents might be abusing their children are not learning. My question was, do you monitor children when they get home from 2 o'clock till the next morning? Do you monitor children on the weekends? Do you monitor children during school holidays? Why is it fine for the parent to be with the child then, but not during the school hours? Really wasn't making sense to me. It was meant to be a conversation. Unfortunately, I don't think it's been as forthcoming, and a big chunk of the vocal homeschoolers are white people, of which a lot of the black ANC government officials are black, and they normally have this clash, which is like, it's racist, it's because you don't want your kids to study with black kids, yeah, but you ANC people are incompetent, and it just becomes a mess. Why should a caring, competent parent whose child is not a ward of the state or an active case of a social worker have to ask permission to perform their parental duty? This is especially pertinent when one considers the incidence of physical and emotional violence at schools, noted by Gauteng Education spokesperson Ufenze Morwane, and reflected in research conducted by educationist Dr. Shuti Steph Kumalo in 2019. The national shortage of schools and teachers on 30 November 2021, Gauteng still had more than 276,000 unplaced pupils, KwaZulu-Natal 226,142, and the Western Cape 29,550 unplaced. And I remember at some point Panyaza Lesufi actually asked Curo, a private schooling group, to take on some of these kids. The lack of proper sanitation and water in many schools, According to Equal Education, 1,243 Eastern Cape schools still have plain pit latrines and the high cost of attending schools that perform academically well. Another serious point of concern is Section 51, brackets 16, which states, the minister may make regulations relating to registration for and the administration of home education. This gives the minister unlimited powers to regulate home education. On 15 December 2021, the BELA bill was referred to the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education and the Select Committee on Education and Technology, Sport, Arts and Culture for their information. This means that it is one step closer on a long journey to being signed into law. From the latest draft, it is clear that 6 years worth of consultations, 2014 to 2021, have not altered Minister Motshekga's views, and she and her department have ignored all comments and proposals from the Home Education Committee, those most affected by the proposed law. I was part of a Brownies homeschooling group, which was for black or non-white parents, black, colored, Indian, etc. They also had some of their champions that were fighting this bill, along with some of the white parents and some of the multicultural and multiracial parents, especially under the Pestalozzi Trust. The minister's intent is clear, but the motivation behind it less so. What happened in the 16 years following 1996 that caused Motshekga and her department to want to bring home education under the ambit of the formal schooling system? Was there a marked increase in the number of child abuse and educational neglect cases of home-educated children? Did the home become an unsafe environment in which to educate a child? Was there an increase in the number of unemployed home-educated pupils? Was there any research conducted that indicated that home education denies a child their right to a basic education? Cape Home Educators has made numerous requests to the Western Cape Education Department for the reasons behind the decision to confine home education to school education, but has been met with silence. When we asked them why an emphasis is placed on CAPS-aligned assessment, we were told that the government must ensure that every child receives a basic education. This seems a fair comment, but it raises the question, is the national curriculum and assessments the only means to determine whether a child is being educated? Absolutely not. In a survey conducted by Cape Home Educators in 2021, 85% of the respondents indicated that they keep some kind of proof of learning. This can be submitted upon request. International benchmark tests for literacy and numeracy can be used as a means to satisfy government's requirements, as this is not curriculum or content related, but they rather focus on skills attained. And I remember there's actually a lot of centers where kids can go and write these tests at specific grades. I know grade 9 is very important because a child can leave school and go work after grade 9. I think grade 7 might be important and another grade, just to test the competency of a child in South Africa and around the world, or if you want your child to go back into mainstream schooling. The Home Education Committee has used all the available channels to petition the Department of Basic Education to change course and draft legislation that is in line with the practice and reality of home education. In 2014-15, representatives from Cape Home Educators who attended a roundtable discussion on the government's policy on home education, which supports the legislative changes, shared international research confirming the validity and success of home education as an educational modality. Other stakeholders made presentations on the character of and various approaches to home education. In 2017, home education associations, parents, children, and other stakeholders submitted comments on the BELA bill. Of the approximately 5,000 comments received, 1,020% were from the Home Education Committee. This is remarkable if one considers that home-educated children form about 1% of the total school-aged population. Home educators submitted very detailed comments expressing their discontent with the draconian laws proposed in Section 51. At a roundtable discussion in February 2020, home education representatives pointed out the flaws and unworkability of the policy on home education. In 2021, Cape Home Educators met representatives of the Western Cape Education Department, one of whom served on the BELA Bill task team, in a series of meetings to discuss concerns regarding Section 51. Despite numerous attempts by home education associations and activists and the Pestalozzi Trust to inform the government of the flaws in the proposed regulations, and despite us offering practical, implementable alternatives that will provide certainty that home-educated children are receiving quality basic education, our voice was ignored. No substantive improvements to the draft bill were made. Rather, compared with the 2017 version, the current draft is even more restrictive and will cause more friction between home educators and the national and provincial education departments, and will increase the administrative and financial burden on families and education departments alike. dailymaverick.co.za article written on the 6th of January 2022 by Anel Berger or Berger. Anel Berger is chairperson of Cape Home Educators, the oldest home education association in South Africa, which celebrated 25 years in 2021. Something to think about. Like I said, I'm going to drop links to my home education videos that I've done in the past, especially when I was going through the process. At some point, I do want to speak about how we are raising our children. Of course, because of industrialization, the schooling system has got this conveyor belt where they want to turn kids into good employees. But the world is fast changing. The world requires kids that can solve problems, that have alternative and multiple skills. Children that can code, children that can speak, that can make online content, that can edit videos, kids that can travel, that can sing, that can play the piano, that can play sports, that can act, that can manufacture things without qualifications, that can sell, create stores without qualifications. That's the world we live in today. And our education system in South Africa is not good enough. Finland is leading the charge, and they are even removing grades, so kids based on their mastery can move. Singapore is leading, especially from maths, science. Japan, of course, South Korea. We need to look into best practices. Schools still play an important part, but a good understanding of what type of adults we're trying to breed for the future is a conversation we fundamentally need to have. And I don't know if the government departments, and even Blade Nzimande in higher education, fundamentally have their finger on the pulse of what's happening. Lastly, if you go on YouTube, you'll watch a TED Talk by Sal Khan of the Khan Academy. The video is on mastery, and it's a brilliant video on how you should have your mindset wired on how to raise your children. Too many of us are raising children that are liabilities and only suck money from us or from the government via tax. Not enough of us are building children that are assets, that add value to our lives, to our families, to our communities. Something that Joshua Maponga said on the Hustlers Corner virtual Mkuku with myself and DJ Spoo was that the way education should be is that a child should walk around their family, their community, list down all the problems, and then approach institutions, approach business people, approach politicians, go online, go to a library, and go and find the solutions to these problems and find the right people that can help them fund and implement the solutions that they come up with. That is meant to be the point of true education. Penuel the Black Pen. Back to school, Baba. Sewagena Pep Akamens Jet. Sewagena. Save that money, boy, so that you can save for your kids. And tell them about it. Watch.